Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm John Carlin. Tonight, we are remembering the 32 lives that were taken 10 years ago. We remember the survivors and the first responders, and we reflect on the resilience of the Virginia Tech community. Today's solemn anniversary began with light. Each year on this date, the university lights its ceremonial candle at midnight. The candle was lit by 2 students as the Virginia Tech Corps of Cadets formed up around the memorial. Following the lighting, the names of the 32 victims were read out loud.
Ross A. Alameddine.
Rima Joseph Samaha.
Caitlin Millar Hammerin.
The Corps of Cadets then stood guard for 32 minutes. A statewide moment of silence was held following the annual wreath laying at the memorial. WSLS 10's Coulter Anstead has been following the Remembrance events, and he has more now on this annual tradition.
Just like past years, the wreath was placed at the memorial here on the drill field, marking the moment the shootings began. But for many, the tradition carried extra meaning this year, with this being the 10th anniversary. 10 years ago today at 9:43 a.m., a gunman went on a rampage that would leave 32 people, including himself, dead. This morning at 9:43 a.m., Governor Terry McAuliffe and university dignitaries walked from Burroughs Hall across the street to the memorial.
I definitely think something like that is appropriate, and I didn't expect anything less. I definitely think it reiterates the stance that, Virginia Tech means to the Commonwealth.
It was the second official commemoration event of the day. The first took place at midnight when hundreds gathered on the drill field to witness the lighting of the ceremonial candle at the memorial.
And each year it's a little bit different, but the same. And I think overall it's just a fitting way to tribute.
I think as a kid when it happened, I didn't feel like I had really that many connections to Blacksburg, but now that I'm here, it means a lot to see just how many people come out.
2 students walked from Burroughs Hall, lit the candle, and walked back, symbolizing the memories of those who died that will forever be with the university.
Matthew Joseph Laporte.
Jocelyn Couture Novak.
The victims' names were read, taps was played, and the Corps of Cadets stood guard for 32 minutes while those in attendance watched in solemn silence. Even the flags were still.
You don't want to have the stigma of it just being a tragedy, and this week has definitely been a week of celebration of life.
The candle here at the memorial will be extinguished at 11:59 tonight. On the campus of Virginia Tech, Coulter Anstead, WSLS 10.
As the Virginia Tech community reflects on the tragedy, the university's commemoration this afternoon highlighted the bond that still exists now a decade later. WSLS 10 has been bringing you team coverage of the anniversary all week. Our very own Rob Manch and Arisha Jones were at the ceremony today. Rob, let's start with you first. Tell us what happened.
Well, Virginia Tech President Timothy Sands and Senator Tim Kaine both spoke to the families of the 32 men and women who were killed here at Virginia Tech 10 years ago, both of them saying that while a decade has passed, neither this school nor this community will ever forget them.
In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them.
Hundreds came to the drill field Sunday to show that 32 fallen Hokies will never be forgotten.
Austin Michelle Cloyd.
For President Tim Sands, the names bring back the memories.
I remember 10 years ago watching events unfold from a distance. As a father, a university professor, and administrator.
Senator Tim Kaine recalled returning quickly from state business abroad 10 years ago to comfort the same families that sit before him today.
I think I can safely say, and I think I'll be able to forever safely say, that April 16, 2007 was the worst day of my life.
In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them.
But though the lost remain in his memory, Kaine says they help him look toward a brighter future.
And today is Easter Sunday, a day of new beginnings and new life and new hope.
And to the families, the university extended one final pledge from Hokie Nation.
We will always be here for you. We will always stand together as a community, and we will always remember.
So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are part of us. We remember them.
And coming up here in about an hour and a half, we're going to also be seeing a vigil here on the drill field to honor those 32 victims, where we'll be continuing our coverage of events here on campus tonight.
Rob, if you would, before you go, tell us a little bit about what you observed with the families during this ceremony. It must be an incredibly emotional and difficult thing to relive.
Well, it was actually amazing to see as they were listening to both President Tim Sands and Senator Tim Kaine. They had their heads held high, even as those 32 names were read along with the biographies. And it was only after the ceremony wrapped up that we started to see those tears and hugs that come along with the incredible tragedy that each of those families has had to bear. In Blacksburg, Rob Manch, WSLS 10.
Thank you, Rob. And as Rob mentioned, hundreds attended that commemoration this afternoon. Some people WSLS 10 spoke to say this tragedy, as you might expect, will always impact the community. WSLS 10's Arisha Jones continues our team coverage tonight. And Arisha, you spoke with a few people this afternoon. Tell us what they had to say.
Well, John, I spoke with people who came from Blacksburg and all over the country who say they just wanted to pay their respects on this 10-year anniversary.
For the kind words.
The drill field on campus became a gathering place for those honoring the 32 people who died April 16th, 10 years ago.
This is my first time being at a commemoration event. I've always watched it from TV. Both my parents are Hokies, so this event really hits home for me.
During the university commemoration, Senator Tim Kaine spoke about the strength and spirit Virginia Tech continues to show. Embracing each other, those in the crowd say the mood was somber at times, but Kaine's message to the people was uplifting, helping to band the communities closer.
It's cool that he felt the need to be close to this community when he was so far away.
It really brought to light when Senator Kaine said that we weren't quick to blame, we were quick to come together as a nation, and I feel that's what Hokie Nation's all about.
English and French major.
One by one, the names and biographies of the 32 victims were read aloud, some people learning about them for the first time.
I hadn't really known a lot about them, but after hearing their bios and after hearing Senator Kaine speak, I feel a lot more connected with them and the events that happened and know that we can all move forward together.
Coming to the commemoration was about showing support for those who continue to mourn and heal.
Being here this year and seeing how everyone's been coming together this weekend and everyone's been there for each other, for anyone who needs support, has just really made me feel even more at home here. And I know that the Hokie Nation will always take care of everyone in the Hokie Nation.
And the crowd displayed just how proud to be part of the Hokie Nation, wearing shirts like "We Are Virginia Tech" and "Hokies United." After the commemoration, everyone was allowed to visit the April 16th memorial as it was closed off for most of the day. Live here at Virginia Tech, Arisha Jones, WSLS 10.
Thank you, Arisha. And as Rob mentioned just before, Arisha, tonight a candlelight vigil will take place at 7:30 this evening. 32 candles will be lit from that same candle that was lit at midnight. The flame will then be passed around, lighting all the candles at the vigil. Tonight's event features a cappella singers, student speakers, and it ends with 32 minutes of silence.
It's remembering all the people that were involved that day, all the people who lost their lives, or the people who helped save me, the first responders and the doctors.
A survivor's story, why a man who was shot during the shooting says he's remained with the Virginia Tech community since that tragedy. Thousands joined the Virginia Tech community this weekend to remember the April 16th tragedy. Among them, survivor Kevin Stern, who's remained a part of the community since that day. WSLS 10's Dawn Jeffries spoke to him earlier this week.
Looking at the semicircle of Hokie stones, one for each life lost April 16th, Kevin Stern knows who he'll walk for in the Run for Remembrance Saturday.
You have the thing that says, who do you run for? And for me, it's always been Michael Pole.
The two sat next to each other in German class 10 years ago.
It's the random, 5 minutes or whatnot that you have where you're both sitting there before class starts and like, hey, did you get this homework done? Just, yeah, that was tough.
Kevin was shot twice on April 16th.
Afterwards, there were a couple of people who were, getting up and walking around or kind of checking people out, and I wasn't able to do that, and then kind of realizing, where I had been shot and that I couldn't walk or anything like that.
A photo of 4 police officers carrying him out of Norris Hall became an iconic image of the tragedy and appeared around the world.
It certainly replays kind of that 5 to 10 second stretch of being carried out of the building and down the grass there to the ambulance. So.
Years later, the reminder remained.
Anytime there was another mass shooting or any kind of reference to it, it was tied to my name. My name would say oh, this is Kevin Stern from the Virginia Tech, April 16th.
Kevin doesn't talk about that day much, although his recovery and return to Virginia Tech, first to receive his diploma, again as a graduate student, and now to work as an engineer, speaks volumes.
It was a very familiar place, and I couldn't imagine going somewhere else and starting out new, without any friends or that kind of thing.
Being here, he says, helped him cope. It helped him heal, and perhaps helps him prepare for the 10th anniversary.
It's more of a reflection of past anniversaries even too, what was the first one like and what was the second one, maybe what was the 5th one, what was last year.
This year things are a little different. Now a father, Kevin says he has new perspective.
Puts it in the perspective of what if that was my son, what if that was, and that's certainly a different take on it that I haven't had yet.
Sunday will be about remembering.
It's remembering all the people that were involved that day, all the people who lost their lives, or the people who helped save me, the first responders and the doctors.
And the people, strangers even, in this community and across the world who offered support.
And then even to the people that, wrote letters, elementary school kids, and stuff that made, up to, 87-year-old grandmas that wrote me a poem and mailed it. It's kind of remembering all that and just being thankful for those people.
Including people like Michael Pole's family, who he only got to know out of tragedy.
Especially now, meeting his family and knowing who he was and that he's no longer here.
Don Jeffries with our story. Emergency responders in Blacksburg are also reflecting on that tragic day 10 years ago. Blacksburg Volunteer Rescue Squad EMTs and paramedics were some of the first on the scene. And among them was Sydney Gay. She was just 20 years old at the time and a sophomore EMT at Virginia Tech. She helped transport several of the injured to the hospital and set up a triage command center. Gay says a decade later, the healing process is still difficult, but she also believes that the experience has made her stronger.
I know it made me more resolute in what I wanted to do. I actually began working at the same hospital that we transported all those patients to, largely for that reason. Something in me just felt like I wanted to be here and be able to help if it were to happen again.
Gay participated in the Run in Remembrance on Saturday morning. Well, a known rivalry takes a break this weekend. How the University of Virginia baseball team pays its respects to Virginia Tech. A rivalry is set aside this weekend as the University of Virginia pays its respects to Virginia Tech. In a letter to President Sands, UVA President Teresa Sullivan says the school expresses its deepest empathy on the anniversary of the shootings. She says, quote, "The violence of that day does not and never will define the Virginia Tech community. What defines your community," she says, "is the dignified and resilient manner in which your students, faculty, staff, and alumni have responded to the tragedy in the days and the years that followed." It continues before that day. The term Hokie Spirit served as a rallying cry for Virginia Tech students, alumni, and fans. After that day, Hokie Spirit became synonymous in many minds with the qualities of unity, resilience, and enduring faith in human perseverance. WSLS 10's Eric Johnson tells us how the Cavaliers baseball team paid tribute to the Hokies this weekend. Eric?
That's right, John. During their recent 3-game series, the UVA Cavaliers decided to pay tribute to the victims of April 16th by placing a special decal on the back of their helmets. And during the final game of the series on Saturday, both Virginia Tech and Virginia wore a special patch on their jerseys as the two schools stood united for the day. It was also First Responders Appreciation Day at English Field. A banner signed by all the participants in the 3.2-mile walk/run and boxed lunches were provided for the first responders. Virginia Tech head baseball coach Patrick Mason says what the Cavaliers did this weekend speaks to the character of their program.
Coach O'Connor runs a first-class program, and the fact that he and his team were willing to wear the patch in honor of the 32 victims speaks worlds of him and their program. It's an important day here on campus. It always will be. I think the character of this community has only gotten stronger and better.
Now, no doubt this was a huge showing of support and respect from UVA. You know, time and time again, John, we see how sports can kind of be a healing agent during tragedies, and obviously this was one that was not an exception.
UVA's president talking about what Hokie Spirit used to mean and what it means now, but it's funny how it sort of transcends, how we all sort of battle in sports, but then we battle life every day.
That's right, and exactly what she said there, that spirit resonates even more so with a larger community and with more teams all across our nation.
Eric Johnson, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Well, baseball teams on the professional level are also commemorating today's anniversary. A moment of silence was held before this afternoon's game between the Washington Nationals and the Philadelphia Phillies. And a moment of silence will also take place before tonight's game between the New York Yankees and the St. Louis Cardinals. As you might remember, the Yankees came to Blacksburg 11 months after the tragedy. The team, including superstars Derek Jeter and Alex Rodriguez, had an exhibition game with the Virginia Tech baseball team and then visited the April 16th memorial. A symbol of perseverance and strength, the university tradition that shows the resilience of the Virginia Tech community. Virginia Tech's class rings have been a symbol of tradition for more than 100 years. And since the April 16th tragedy, they've been a symbol of remembrance and resilience. Each year, a committee of students designs its own distinct ring in the sophomore year. The class of 2009 rings had already been designed when the April 16th tragedy happened. But the company behind the rings called to ask if students wanted to pay tribute, and they decided to make meaningful changes.
You understood right away from the audience response. And it wasn't like wild cheering, because that wouldn't have been appropriate, but we knew like this was the right thing to do. And it was a good feeling. So they made the decision to...
So the class side of the 09 ring shows the VT ribbon, a symbol created in remembrance of the lives impacted. The opposite side reads, "We will prevail," a quote distinguished by Professor Nikki Giovanni that she read at the convocation the day after the tragedy. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Before we leave you tonight, I want to reflect for a moment on what it was like 10 years ago today. Normally, we here in the news business research a story long before we present it to you. But on April 16th, 2007, we were often learning the facts while we were live on the air. As the numbers of dead rose through unbelievable numbers to unprecedented totals, we learned at the same time the viewers did. There was no heads up or behind-the-scenes briefings. We all learned together of the method of the killings, the chaining of the doors on Norris Hall, the valiant efforts of faculty members who blocked classroom doors with their bodies and gave their lives to keep the gunmen out. Many, if not most of us in the newsroom, had significant connections to Virginia Tech. We had friends, family, and in my case, colleagues and students there. I don't mean to suggest that our job was as impossible as those who were on the scene, witness to the tragedy, and helpless to do anything, even as they saw cell phones ringing beside the bodies of students with caller IDs that said mom or dad. But we know that we, while independent journalists, felt that we were a part of you, suffering, wondering, and mourning beside you, unbelieving not only that it happened, but that it happened here. Now is the 10th anniversary of that day, and we as a community have moved on as best we can. The details and images of that day are no longer daily news, but they are never far from our minds. On behalf of the handful of us who are still at the station and the many others who have moved along their lives' journeys over the past 10 years, I wanted to let you know how difficult that day was here on this side of the camera. Let's hope and pray we never have to go through anything like that again. Thanks for joining us. We'll continue our coverage of the 10th anniversary tonight at 11.